3. Thank you so much, Elder Swan, for lifting up this passage, and we'd like to just reiterate these verses 7 through 11, Philippians chapter number 3, and let's take our reading at verse number 7. Listen for the word of the Lord. But what things were gained to me, these I have counted loss for Christ. Yet indeed I also count all things lost for the excellence of the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and count them as rubbish, that I may gain Christ, and be found in him, not having my own righteousness, which is from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ, the righteousness which is from God by faith, that I may know him, and the power of his resurrection, and the fellowship of his sufferings, being conformed to his death, if by any means I may attain to the resurrection from the dead. For a little while tonight, I want to preach from these words: I've gotten back more than I've given up. Look at your neighbor real quick and say, neighbor, oh neighbor, I've gotten back more than I've given up. Our text tonight, my brothers and sisters, opens up at a point wherein Paul, dependent of this particular passage, is at a point of re-evaluation. Paul is at a point of reflection. He is re-evaluating his life and all of his life's accomplishments. Paul, at the time of this writing, is literally doing some soul searching. He's considering and reconsidering certain things in his life that he had previously thought were important, only to discover that the majority of the things that he's put great stock in and great emphasis on, things that he'd spent the better part of his life trying to accomplish and to attain, really in the grand scheme of things didn't mean much at all. Paul is at a point in his life wherein he is faced with the gripping conclusion that for the better part of his life he has been consumed with carnal conquests that have no eternal or redeeming value whatsoever. He's at a point in his life that now he is faced with the thought of knowing that on the one hand he has everything, but on the other hand he has nothing at all. When he writes this letter to the church at Philippi, he writes from what I call a readjusted perspective. He opens the letter in chapter 1, verse 21, and Paul wants these readers to know that despite the things that I have attained in life, what's really important to me is Christ. In fact, he says in chapter 1, verse 21, for me now to live is Christ, and to die is gain. It's amazing, brothers and sisters, that Paul is at a point that he would rather have the master's presence as opposed to material possessions. He's at a point in his life wherein he is no longer consumed by the carnal, but he is at a point in his life that now he wants Christ more than he wants creature comforts. It's interesting, brothers and sisters, that when we look at this text and we study this text, that the text is silent as it relates to whether or not there were some specific sequences or occurrences that happened in Paul's life that acted as a trigger to pump him or to prime him to have this deep moment of reflection. All we know is that when we read the Philippian narrative, it suggests that Paul viewed his life in the flesh and discovered that there was something greater in life than the material possession and the material things that he currently enjoyed. Paul woke up one day and realized that it has to be more than this. Paul realized, perhaps there's somebody in the building who knows what I'm talking about. Have you ever gotten to the point that you've already achieved material possessions, you've already attained the material things and the creature comforts, but you're at a point in your life that you need more than money can buy? And I know that maybe some of you tonight can't relate to what I'm saying, because I'm sure in this place tonight we have a room full of people that are trying to attain stuff and get stuff, but Paul is at a point in his life that he recognized now that stuff is just not enough. I wish somebody would help me tonight, and I just feel there to pause and to mention that there is going to come a time that you are going to need more than just a nice car. You're going to need more than just a nice house and nice clothes. There's going to come a time when you're going to need more than a nice portfolio, stocks and bonds. There's going to come a time when you wake up and come face to face with the gripping conclusion, I need something beyond the material. I need something beyond what money can buy. because money is good, but when the devil is on my track and when I'm facing and going up against strongholds in my life, I need something beyond the bling bling. I need the real thing. I don't want to help me preach tonight. I need something beyond the material. And the text again, brothers and sisters, is silent as it relates to what happened in Paul's life. But we do know by looking in verses 7 and 8 that Paul did not get at this point overnight. Paul in verse 7 says, I have counted. In verse 8, he says, I count, which suggests to us that Paul is involving himself in some type of evaluation, that Paul is at the point of reflection, that Paul has literally reconciled the account of his life. He has audited his situation and has come back with the gripping conclusion that something in life is more than all of my accomplishments and all of my educational prowess. Paul reflects over his life, and Paul is at a turning point. Stay with me. Paul is at a point in his life where God has stopped him and caused him to reevaluate what's really important in life. And my brothers and sisters, if you have not had a turning point experience, keep waking up every morning saying good morning and lying down saying good night. God has a way of allowing us to go through some stuff that will cause us to reevaluate what's really important in your life. If you haven't had a turning point, if you've not experienced some stuff in your life, just keep getting up saying good morning and lying down saying good night, because I want to suggest that one day you're going to experience something that's going to make you recognize that having all of your stuff is not really making you happy. The Bible declares, what will it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? In fact, some of the stuff we have is the cause of some of our misery. I believe it was a rapper who said, I know you don't listen to that kind of music, but more money, more problems. Tell me somebody. I believe that's somebody's situation tonight, that if you had less stuff, you'd have less problems. And Paul evaluates his life and says, I counted all loss for the sake of Christ. It's amazing that Paul says, everything I spent my life trying to get, when I put it next to Christ, is lost. And I'm talking to somebody tonight who's trying to reach for the 3 S's: status, stability, and success. I'm talking to the one who's busy trying to be the mover and the shaker. My assignment tonight is to tell somebody it's nothing wrong with being a mover and a shaker as long as you're being moved by the Spirit and shaken by the Lord. There's nothing wrong with having a house. There's nothing wrong with the fancy and nice things of life. But life without Christ is nothing at all. And there's going to come a time when you wake up and realize that even after all the stuff you gained, a house is not really a home unless the presence of the Lord fills it. I feel like preaching if you're with me. Paul says that everything I have gained is lost. And it's interesting, Dr. Snowden, that he uses the word lost, because the word lost in the Greek really means detriment. And Paul says everything that I've gained up until now is really, when I compare it to Christ, is a detriment. It's detrimental. Everything I've gained to this point, Paul says, when I compare it to Christ, all of that stuff is detrimental. And Paul says it's detrimental because there's no redeeming quality about it. Meaning God is not getting glory. God is not being magnified. Paul is saying, at this point in my life, I don't want anything or anybody in my life or in my space that's not bringing God glory or enhancing the kingdom of God. Paul says my education was fine, but if I'm not using it for the glory of God, it's for not. The car is good, but if I'm not using it to transport somebody to the house of God, I don't need it. I thank God for the money, but if I'm not using it to bless somebody, it's a detriment. Paul says I'm at the point where I don't want anything or anybody in my life that's a detriment, because I've come too far from where I started from to allow something or somebody to allow me to go. Am I talking to anybody? God is trying to tell somebody in this season of Lent, we need to reevaluate our lives, and anything that's not advancing the kingdom is a detriment. The question that I have for you tonight is, why do you want the success? Are you going to give God glory and honor in the position? Why do you want the raise on the job? Are you going to increase your time, your offerings, and the sacrificial gifts? Why is it that you want the new wardrobe? Are you going to take the old wardrobe and bless somebody else with it? Why do you want the Lord to give you an increase? Are you going to take the surplus and honor God with a first fruit offering? What is the motivation? Because Paul says that these things are a detriment. He says, I consider them to be rubbish. Look at verse number 8. I'm almost finished here. Verse number 8, Paul says, I consider them rubbish that I may gain Christ. Now the word rubbish literally connotes trash. And Paul is saying, all of my accomplishments, when I compare them to Christ, those things are nothing but trash. I asked Paul, what are you saying? Are you suggesting that those things are not profitable? Paul says, yes, they were profitable, but when I put them in proximity to Christ, these things are no longer advantageous to me, because those things represented where I was at that season of my life. And so anything that does not speak to where I